just says more than anything. It's like clear he's like searching for reactions. Hi everybody. Hello. So today is a very unusual sight. Whenever I pull the Yeti out, I kind of always say the same thing, like, oh my gosh, I haven't used this in so long. But we have it back today, and I am doing a also unusual like topic. But those who don't know, I follow a lot of true crime stuff. I feel like it's very weird to say like you're true crime obsessed. Like I feel like that's almost disrespectful. But I listen to lots of different true crime podcasts and whatnot, and today I decided to do one ASMR style, and I chose a case that is set in 2000, and I just wanted to start like this whole thing off by saying there are some trigger warnings like throughout. I will try to mention like right before, and I do want to say that there sexual assault is mentioned in this, so if that's a trigger for you, again, you can listen. I will make sure to before that portion to give another trigger warning, but I just wanted to start with that, and you guys can let me know what you think about this. Obviously it's not for everybody, but I'm just gonna jump right in. I will be looking over here for the most part, because I kind of like have all the information that I was researching and whatnot, but I'm just gonna jump right in. Okay, I will kind of trying to be doing some ASMR throughout. Okay, so in May of 2000, two best friends were awaiting their high school graduation, and their names were Elizabeth, also referred to, I probably refer to her as Liz, Liz Reiser, I believe is how it's pronounced, just 17 years old, and Brandy Hicks, just 18 years old, young girls that were about to graduate high school. And basically they had plans to go to Brandy's choir banquet, so they went to that, and then afterwards they went to a local video store because they were going to watch movies at Brandy's house. So Liz was going to spend the night at Brandy's house, and there was a quote from Liz's mother that basically said this was a little bit unusual given it was a school night, but they were about to graduate. So it was okay. All their final exams were through, so they were just gonna go have a relaxing movie night at Brandy's house. But while the two girls browsed movies in the hometown video store, it was actually called Hollywood Movie, I believe. They, chatted about their upcoming graduation. Everything was normal. They were excited to go watch their movies, normal teenage girl stuff. So they picked out their movies, they checked out, they were walking out to Brandy's car when a older man approached them. He was described to have had a ball cap on with like curly, like dark hair kind of coming out of the bottom of the ball cap, and he basically told them that he had no way to get home, but he had $20 to pay them if like they could take him home really quick. And he also said it would only take 10 minutes, so 10 minutes, $20 if you girls can take me home. The girls were like kind of weirded out by it. Liz was more on edge about the situation than Brandy. this like would not fly now. But if this happens to you, and even if you're with someone else, like they have $20, they can take a bus or a cab. Like I know buses don't go everywhere, but like they can take a cab. Anyway, ultimately they agree to take him, and the three of them get into Brandy's car, and the man begins giving them directions to his home. So where am I? They follow the instructions. At this point, Brandy is driving because it is Brandy's car, and Liz is in the passenger seat, and the man is in the back. And the man is giving them directions. Everything seems fine, but then a full 10 minutes pass by, and he's like still directing them to his home. And so the girls are kind of like, okay, it's been 10 minutes. Why aren't we there? And he just continues to say, hey, it's just around the corner. It's so close. So 15 minutes pass, and Brandy and Liz really begin to worry. They're like, oh, okay, like, you need to get out. Like, you can walk. So Brandy actually stops the car and says this and tells the man, you know, if we are really that close, you can finish your walk to your house if it's like only a couple minutes. So you need to get out. And basically the man is kind of like, no, but the girls keep they're persistent. They're like, we have to get home. It's a school night. We really need to get home. They're trying to keep the conversation light. The man calmly replies with, would it make a difference if I had a gun? So of course this changes the entire tone of the vehicle, like immensely, because there was anything violent, anything prior to this. So the man then asks if the girls have any cash, in which they said no. They also didn't even have cell phones at the time. So he ordered them to continue to drive down the road. So the girls are thinking, okay, well, if he has a gun, then we better listen. This actually is a point where I found a lot of discrepancies in some of my research. There were a couple articles and podcasts that I listened to / read that said he never had a gun. He just said he had a gun. And there was another podcast, actually multiple, I would say more, that I read and researched on, said that he truly did have a gun because he pointed it to their head. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Like, I really could not pinpoint whether he had one or not. Some podcasts that I listened to on this said absolutely he had one. He pointed it to their head, and other ones said he never had one. Brandy never saw it. So I'm not really sure what's true because I couldn't find an exact account from Brandy herself. I'm not sure she's written a book or anything like that, but just keep that in the back of your mind. But basically the threat of having a gun, or actually him having the gun, was enough for the girls to, oblige, and Brandy continues driving. Basically he brings them to a road that leads to a hayfield that's on top of a hill, so they're like kind of down lower, and there's a hill, I don't know which way from them, but there's a hill near them that leads to a hayfield. And he orders Brandy to stop the car and put her hands on the steering wheel. Once she's done this, he orders Brandy to remove her shoelaces, like take them out of her shoes, and then he tells Liz, who's in the passenger seat now, to tie Brandy's hands to the wheel. obviously alone and somewhat covered in blood. And he opens the driver's side of the door and orders Brandy now to get out of the car. Brandy, not knowing what happened to her best friend, I'm sure she kind of has somewhat of a good idea. She actually yells, "You are an idiot. I obviously can't get out of here. You had my friend tie me up." And this enrages the man, so he slashes the laces on her hands, so her hands are now free, and he forcefully leads her up the hill, where at this point they're literally just standing in silence while he smokes a cigarette. This is also another point that I want to bring up some discrepancies, because again, I read probably like 8 or 9 pieces on this case and listened to 3 podcasts on it, and it's crazy the like discrepancies there are. It's like what and this is a major one. Some of the stories, some of the recounts of this say that Brandy saw her friend Liz murdered on the ground up at the hill, and other accounts say that she saw what looked like a mound of dirt and she had no idea where Liz was. She didn't see Liz. So these are pretty major like differences that I think don't really matter in the like grand scheme of the story, but you'll notice why that I like wanted to bring that up here in a little bit. But for whatever reason, the man leads Brandy back to her car and puts her back in the back seat, and he gets into the driver's seat and just drives away. So Brandy's life is now ripped out from under her, or supposedly, depending on the discrepancy, when the man looks over and says, "I just killed your best friend." And depending on whether she did see the body up at the hill or not, it's kind of like unknown. I guess Brandy and whoever Brandy has told knows. The police, if it just got lost in kind of translation. But she doesn't react, basically, either because she already knew and saw her, or because she's just scared, and this is traumatizing. So he ends up just saying, "Just kidding, I let her go, like she's fine." So he's either like trying to play mind games with her or trying to like gain trust. Not really sure. Only he would know what his motivations were for lying about that. So eventually, while driving, the man spots a police car that like pulls up behind them at a stoplight. He basically just tells Brandy that he'll shoot her and the cop if she tries to scream or get out or basically do anything. So she follows orders. She doesn't do anything, and they proceed to drive. And they drive to a river that is just like nearby their hometown, and it has this like railroad that eventually leads up to a railroad bridge. So they get out of the car and they begin walking, and basically just kind of having small talk. He's like just chatting with her, and she's doing her best to really like open up and be nice. She's like, "This might be the only way I can survive." And but basically they get to this crossing where there's a railroad bridge. It's about a 25-foot drop into the river below. But he abruptly stops walking near an abandoned train car, and he turns to ask Brandy if she has any jewelry. So she thought this was kind of weird given like the circumstances, and she's like, "Yeah, I have these 2 rings," and he takes them from her. And then he asks her, "How badly do you want to live?" Like this, it's like clear he's like searching for reactions, like given like what he said in the car to her about killing Liz and then not killing Liz. And now he's like, "Well, how badly do you want to live?" Like he's like seeking a reaction go at this point and gives her instructions. You just have to follow the railroad, and it's gonna take you to a police station. So she's obviously feeling like crushed about everything that just happened, about either knowing the circumstances behind Liz and what happened to her, or the unknown of not knowing. And I actually don't think she knows, because I swear I saw a quote that I will say later. But I truly believe that she did not see Liz's body up there, just based off of what I read and saw in some of the quotes. But so the man says that they have to backtrack just a little bit so he'll have time to get away. So they have to walk back to the car, and then Liz can proceed back down to the railroad and like continue to the police station. So they start walking back past the abandoned railroad car, get onto the bridge with the 25-foot drop, where apparently plans change again, and the man forces her to kneel right at like the edge of the bridge and begins strangling her. So he actually uses the laces that were from her shoes that she took off earlier. So Brandy at this point is going in and out of consciousness. Like, she like fully comes back to it and realizes that he tried strangling her, so she like literally plays dead, and he just begins like beating her up at this point, kicking her, punching her, doing anything he can, just to be sure that she's either dead or like to wake her up if she's unconscious. She is doing her absolute best, but a certain right blow to the right place, just like she gasps for air, and he knows, of course, she's not, or she is alive. She had not been killed. So he continues to beat on her, and he actually tries to snap her neck multiple times, and was filled with rage when he couldn't actually successfully do it. And basically he's just doing everything he can at this point to beat the life out of Brandy. Once he, yet another discrepancy, once he either decides that she was dead or like didn't care, like she, like, I don't know, that she was dead enough. I don't know. Some things say he knew, he was so certain she was dead, and some say that he, like, I don't know, that he thought it was close enough. Whatever. Regardless, he throws her body over the bridge, and her body just like kind of swings with her foot caught. So now he's trying to like smack like her feet down so she falls into the river below, in which she does fall into the river below. So now Brandy's body is in the river below. Liz has been stabbed multiple times up by that hill in the trees, and the man just kind of remains on the bridge for a while and probably smokes another cigarette, kind of walks around, and eventually he heads back to Brandy's car and drives away. So the girls' families realize that they were both missing in the middle of the night, so the searching begins immediately. The next day, though, a man named Jeff Mullenix claims to have information regarding a murder. So he tells the police that his brother-in-law took him to a location on Harmon Hill Road, and this was in fact the road that the girls had been taken to, and that his brother-in-law claimed to have killed 2 girls the night before. Jeff continued to tell the police that the brother-in-law searched for the broken knife at Liz's crime scene, showed Jeff the body of Liz, and that they together threw the piece of broken knife into the river that he also threw Brandy's body. Once Jeff was alone, he immediately called the police. He, tried to keep it together when he was with his brother-in-law, but he immediately So basically, that brother-in-law, his name is Matthew Vaca, V-A-C-A, Vaca, a 27-year-old father of 3. Let me repeat that. Father of 3. He was also on probation for grand theft and forgery at the time, and because of this, police could arrest him immediately. So, basically the case, or they just started building evidence against Matthew right away. Like, they had all this information from Jeff, who knew location. He knew what Matthew said he did. He said where the murder weapon was thrown. Like, they have all of this. They just have to go uncover it and get it into their possession. This was when an off-duty cop, and keep in mind, this is the wee early morning. All of this was everything that happened was the night before, and so these are the wee morning hours. And so this was when a off-duty cop drops a huge bomb on the investigation when he brings in a bloody, injured teenage girl that he found on the side of the road. And I think we can all guess that was Brandy. So yeah, Brandy not only survived her attack, but survived that 25-foot fall from the bridge, which can potentially be attributed to a ton of rainfall that had happened, so it rose the water level in the river, making the fall a little bit safer. Okay, so kind of the rest of this story is going to be Brandy's recounting of events, and so she basically recounts that she was horrified when Matthew walked down to the car without Liz, and she thought that she would for sure be murdered after she had yelled at Matthew. She said she wasn't sure why she yelled that Matthew was an idiot, but she did. She says that when Matthew told her, and this is again a discrepancy point, when Matthew told her that he let Liz go, that she believed him. So this really makes me wonder about all those discrepancies, is if she had seen Liz's body up on the hill, then obviously she wouldn't have believed that, so it's a little frustrating that there can be these discrepancies and then have such a bold statement like that. But basically she continues to recount the events and says yeah, Matthew was trying to make small talk to the river, so I did my best to make myself seem like a real person with real life experiences. And Brandy said she really didn't understand what was happening to her when she was attacked after Matthew told her that she could be let go. And it was literally her just blacking out. She didn't realize that he was strangling her. So once she came back, she realized that she had been attacked. So at this point is when she did try to play dead and held in her breath, as literally as much as possible. And all this made me think of is as a kid, trying your best to playfully either play dead or hold your breath, or not let someone see you breathe or whatever, and thinking how hard that is and how hard you try to do that, and then trying to do that in a life or death situation. I can't even imagine that, not to mention her trying to do that while he was kicking and punching her. I can't even fathom. But basically, yeah, she said she held her breath in as long as she could. But with the realization that Brandy was still alive, he, tried to snap her neck, and she said she was in and out of consciousness, and that at one point she blacked out, and the next thing she remembered was her head hitting the water. So she was not aware of her dangling from the bridge when her feet got caught. It was okay, I'm getting beat up. Okay, now I must have been dropped into the water, in which she keeps her head down and plays dead yet again. She did not because she still believes there's a police station there, which there wasn't. So she eventually comes to the road, and that's where, you know, the off-duty police officer finds her. Actually, a couple of cars, I think 2, drive by without stopping to help. I'm sure she looks kind of horrifying, though, to people, but thank goodness for the off-duty police officer to have found her. And Brandy was able to give the police a description of the man, which obviously matched Matthew. Even Matthew's mother, like, reached out to tell police that the description was Matthew, and obviously the brother-in-law's account of the situation. So, like, they knew they needed to get Matthew, but I just, like, I think it's crazy, like, that, like, all of the family was just, like, calling him out. It really makes me wonder what they, like, had to say about him, or what they think about him, because that's crazy. So Brandy also divulges the moments before Liz was pulled from the car and taken to the place that she would be murdered, and basically those moments were that they looked at each other and they cried, and they told each other they loved each other. Brandy was apologizing. She's like, I'm so sorry that I agreed to pick him up. Like I know you were upset by it. And Liz is like, no, like, I agreed too. So they had this moment, like, hey, we're gonna see each other. It's gonna be okay. And at this point, Matthew flung the door open, and the events that proceeded did, and they were not able to see each other again. But Brandy's victim impact statement to Matthew basically was that he took a beautiful soul. It was all very focused on Liz, not focused on herself. Focused on the fact that he took a beautiful soul from the world. She also asked the prosecution to not seek the death penalty, and he was sentenced to 96 years in prison, eligible for parole in 2096, but he will not be alive by then. Brandy went on to marry and have kids. So I want to spend just a few minutes talking about motive now. And this is also when I want to talk about the fact that there were so many discrepancies about a gun. Why couldn't he kill her if he had a gun? If he did have a gun that whole time? And I saw so many articles that said he had a gun. Why couldn't he kill her? Like, why was he kicking her and trying to punch her to death? But he had a gun the whole time. That's what makes me think that the articles that I read that said he truly didn't have a gun are the correct version of events. He was on drugs. Like, that's not a supposed thing. Like, he was on drugs. And there's actually I think it was the judge. Yeah, it was the judge. So, Matthew says, I don't know, like, why. I myself don't know why. And then the judge says, was it drugs? Was it the music? I don't know what that means. And Matthew says, I'm responsible for it. And it seems like he nods to, was it the drugs? But here's what I don't understand about why they keep coming back to what, like, drugs. Like, obviously he said he was trying to rob them. Like, he agreed that, like, that his intentions were to rob the girls. But they were high school girls, and that was obvious. How much money do you really think high school girls have? Like, that motive doesn't make sense. So now you can say, okay, the drugs plus the robbery, intentions together, like, maybe he wasn't putting 2 and 2 together because he was on drugs. Like, maybe he, like, didn't realize that they probably wouldn't have money. But regardless, like, the girl, like, Brandy recounts that it was a fairly normal, like, conversation. Like, he couldn't have been that messed up, like, to not have gained their trust girls to at least eventually agree to take him home. So I am not buying the drugs thing. I would love to know more about his like what his family has to say about him, because the fact that they threw him under the bus right away, and the fact that he was supposedly doing this because he was on drugs and he wanted to rob them, like, nothing clicks for me. And it makes me very frustrated that, like, I literally think either something happened in his life and he just didn't care. Like, he was just gonna go on a bender and, like, just commit the most heinous acts, and they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. It had nothing to do with money. It had nothing to do with robbing them. I truly think he was done. He was done with his life. It was over anyway, whether it was a divorce or, like, you know, anything. But okay, you guys can let me know your thoughts. Again, I know the discrepancies are frustrating, but that's kind of what you see with some of these things. I feel like this one has more discrepancies than most, but it's kind of just what happens sometimes, especially in, like, something like this. Usually we don't get this much information because we don't have a survivor, and the fact that Brandy survived is literally amazing. But I feel like I probably, like, forgot to scratch and, like, make sounds sometimes throughout when I was, like, getting going, but we'll see when I'm editing. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, I hope that I'm able to put enough, like, trigger warnings throughout. And honestly, like, it was very interesting for me to, like, research and get this information and do this. So if you guys really